Hey friends, welcome back to the Lifestyle School podcast. This is my first podcast back recording since having my baby in January. I've had a wonderful 6-week maternity leave, but I'm back, and today we're going to be talking about my pregnancy, the experience, and metabolically what's happening. So buckle up. I just wanted to let you guys know that I am recording this podcast standing up with my baby in the wrap. So if you hear some squawking, he is currently passed out asleep, but there's a small chance that you might hear him making some noises or just breathing heavy. So anyway, I wanted to let you know that at the forefront. But today's episode is personal. But I want to say it's also very intentional. So I want to share my pregnancy and postpartum experience, the good, the hard, and the honest, right? It's not a highlight reel. This is not going to be the curated social media version. Although I don't know that I really have a curated social media version. I just disappeared a little bit from social media because pregnancy is hard and I just didn't want to be on there complaining every day. This is not going to be the dramatic version either. It's just going to be real, okay? Because pregnancy and postpartum are two of the most metabolically intense season a woman will ever walk through. And, we rarely talk about them that way. We talk about baby milestones, we talk about nursery themes, or we even talk about bouncing back, right? But we don't talk enough about what's actually happening in a woman's body. The insulin shifts, the hormone swings, the sleep deprivation, the inflammation, the identity shift that happens, and what rebuilding really looks like, right? At the end of it, or is it ever really done until they leave the house? But so today we're going to walk you through this season for me, what surprised me in the best way, what stretched me in uncomfortable ways, and what I'm going to be doing intentionally now as I move forward postpartum. And I want to be very clear from the outset, this is not a bounce back story. Um, it's a story that's just beginning, and hopefully it's a rebuilding story. Okay. And whether you're currently pregnant, newly postpartum, maybe years out, but still feeling the ripple effects, or maybe simply a woman trying to understand her body better, I hope this episode gives you some perspective and permission, right? And maybe even a little peace to just walk out your walk, right? Before we get started, as always, a little disclaimer, I'm not a medical doctor. This is not medical advice. If you have any major health concerns, please consult with a qualified healthcare professional before making any major changes to your diet or lifestyle, especially if you're navigating pregnancy. Okay, let's make good decisions with that. So, anyways, let's get into it. So, I don't know if you can hear my big kids yelling in the background, but they are. But we're going to keep recording this episode. Okay, guys, we're just being really real today. This is a really raw episode back from maternity leave. I have been talking about my husband being on paternity leave for weeks. And so now I keep saying that instead of maternity leave, but I kind of had to leave because he was home driving the ship with the kids, which was such a gift. Okay. So let's talk about the reality of my pregnancy, and just maybe a little bit of history. So I will say, from a pregnancy perspective, this is my fourth pregnancy. I'm 35. My first pregnancy, I was 26 for the majority of it. So, this is like a wide span of time. I have historically been someone who's gained a lot of weight when pregnant. I have never gained, I think, less than 40 pounds in a pregnancy, just to give you perspective. Okay. Um, this pregnancy, I was really hoping that it would be like this magical thing for me. It's like, I feel like I know the most information that I've ever known about weight, how to manage it, how like my metabolic health works, right? And I was like, this is going to be, different. I'm going to do XYZ. And then I got pregnant and, week 5 hit and I was literally in bed for 2 weeks. The nausea was so incredibly intense. And then I also had some really low blood pressure, which made me feel extremely dizzy to the point where I couldn't drive a car for 2 weeks. I didn't feel safe to drive. And so I pretty much barely left my bed or the recliner because I would stand up and I would feel so incredibly dizzy, combined with the nausea. My husband's an anesthesiologist, and I was like, I wish you could just like put me under anesthesia and wake me up when this is over, because I was just so incredibly miserable. I was incredibly tired. I did not have any cravings, but I had no appetite. And the only thing I could eat and I had to eat to kind of suppress the nausea was carbohydrates. And if you've been listening to this podcast, hope plus carbohydrates equal fat gain. So, yeah, I gained a lot of weight my first trimester. I wasn't vomiting, thankfully, but the nausea was super intense. And so, yeah, I just ate a ton of carbs, and those carbs just stayed with me, and my weight jumped up a lot. So much so my OB was like, you're gaining a lot of weight. And I was like, I know, I'm just surviving, right? My training really became non-existent for a little while. I tried to keep up those morning runs that I was doing, the half a mile to start the day. I did do them for a tiny bit when I was feeling really sick, but then I was just like, this is too much. So I just focused on making it through, and then I resumed those once I started to feel a little bit better. But to be honest, I was not really getting any exercise at that point. And then I would say my sleep was fine. All I wanted to do was sleep because it was the only time I could escape the reality of how I felt. So that was the beginning of pregnancy. Um, and then, moving through pregnancy, second trimester, things typically get a little bit better. In my experience, and this is why I wasn't on social media like the whole time I was pregnant, is because I am just kind of miserable the whole time I'm pregnant. And as I'm sure you know, when you feel miserable, you tend to want to complain a lot. And I don't want to be a complainer, but like, you don't feel like you have anything positive and upbeat to share when you feel so awful and negative. So it was like, if I don't have anything good to say, I'm not going to say anything good at all, because you can only be a Debbie Downer for like so long. So yes, over the course of my pregnancy, I gained, I want to say probably around 50-ish pounds. To be honest, towards the end, I stopped looking and tracking it, because for the last 6 weeks of my pregnancy, I was totally like carb free, other than like a half a cup of fruit a day. And I was still gaining weight. And I did some spurts of low carb in there. I would say generally, I ate pretty healthy during my pregnancy, despite, other than like a lot of carbs in the beginning when I was so nauseous. But after that kind of regulated, I went back to my normal diet, not super low carb, not anything crazy, but we were traveling a lot when I was in my second trimester, which, makes things hard from an eating perspective. And yeah, I gained a lot of weight, and that's kind of historically been the way it's gone for me. And I was hoping this pregnancy would be different, but it wasn't. And if I'm being totally honest, when you feel like you're doing everything right, and there's like nothing else you can do because you're pregnant and you just keep gaining a lot of weight, at some point it's like you have to just like stop tracking it, because what's the point? And that's kind of where I got to at the end. It was like, what can I do? I'm already like not having any carbs and I'm just gaining weight. So I'm not even going to pay attention, because it's just depressing, because I know this is all weight I'm going to have to lose after I give birth. So that's the weight part of my pregnancy journey. And then when it comes to energy, and like training, appetite, I am typically in a lot of discomfort and pain when I'm pregnant. And that, affects your energy. It affects your appetite. Like, when you are in pain, you want more carbs generally. Like, you want to comfort yourself with food. And it makes training really hard. And then, the further I get into pregnancy, typically, like most women, my sleep just becomes almost non-existent towards the end. So, long story short, pregnancy is really hard for me. This is my fourth time through it. I don't enjoy it. And I'm really, really thankful to be on the other side of it. I'm so thankful to be able to get pregnant. I know there's so many women who want to be pregnant, and I have so much empathy for them. But at the same time, that doesn't, negate my reality of like the fact that I am just miserable when I'm pregnant. Some people are like, oh, it's like such a beautiful season or whatever. And as I have always been one, it's like, this is a means to an end. Give me that baby on the outside of my body and we'll move forward. So that is kind of the physical reality of my pregnancy. So I want to take for a minute though and zoom out and talk about what's actually happening hormonally and metabolically during pregnancy. I know I've done podcasts on this before, but I think it's really important because if you don't understand the physiology, it's very easy to think, something is going wrong when in reality, our body is doing exactly what it's designed to do. One of the most important things to understand in pregnancy is that pregnancy is a state of progressive insulin resistance, which is why we gain weight, some more than other, because some of us are naturally more inclined to insulin resistance than others. But now, before that triggers anyone, I want to differentiate that this is physiological, not pathological. And there's a big difference in that because pathological insulin resistance is what we talk about in the context of metabolic dysfunction, chronically elevated insulin, elevated blood sugar, fatty liver, and long-term disease risk, right? Where physiological insulin resistance in pregnancy is something that's very purposeful that our body is doing, okay? And as pregnancy progresses, especially into the second and third trimester, our body naturally becomes a little bit more insulin resistant so that more glucose stays in the bloodstream instead of being rapidly stored away. And the reason why it does that is because glucose needs to be available for the baby. It's a nutrient shuttling strategy. And, your body is prioritizing the growing placenta and baby. And so it intentionally reduces our tissue sensitivity to insulin so that more crucial, sorry, I just like lost my train. So that more fuel can circulate and reach the baby. I'm sorry, because that sentence I really struggled. And so like what that means is slightly higher fasting glucose. It means, you may notice more carbohydrate sensitivity. It means that your body becomes more efficient at storing energy. And to be clear, this isn't a failure of the system. This is like the intelligent design of your body. And then layered on top of that, blood volume increases dramatically during pregnancy. And by the third trimester, blood volume can increase by, anywhere from 40 to 50%, which is a lot. That's like not subtle. Our heart is working harder. Our vascular system is adapting. And, our body is expanding its fluid compartments. And this is one of the reasons why we feel more out of breath or swollen. I don't know about you, but I always start to snore at the end of pregnancy because of that fluid retention. It's kind of hilarious, but it's also part of why the scale goes up in ways that, have nothing to do with fat mass, although sometimes it can feel like that, right? You're literally carrying more fluid and building an entirely new vascular network for the placenta. And then on top of that, on top of the insulin, on top of the fluid, we do have some thyroid shifts that happen. Thyroid hormones heavily are heavily influenced during pregnancy. And HCG can stimulate the thyroid early on, sometimes increasing thyroid hormone production. Later in pregnancy, total thyroid hormone levels increase because you produce more thyroid binding, it's going to be hard to say this word, globulin. There we go. We got it out. And that matters here. And what matters here is that your metabolic rate is adjusting, right? Your body is trying to supply energy for two organisms, you and your baby. So, this is why you feel hotter than usual. Your heart rate is slightly elevated. Your energy really fluctuates. This is all hormonal. And then on top of that, there's another layer, guys, is your cortisol and placental hormones. Okay. So cortisol naturally rises during pregnancy. And again, it's not inherently bad. I think sometimes we, hear cortisol and we think bad. But cortisol helps mobilize fuel. It plays a role in fetal development, and it supports our energy availability. Like, when we talk about fasting, we need a little bit of cortisol because it helps balance our blood sugar. But increased cortisol paired with increasing insulin resistance can create a body that is more primed to store fat, right? Or store fuel as fat. And so when you add placental hormones, especially lactagon, human placental lactagon, which further promotes insulin resistance and fat mobilization early on and fat storage later on. Um, this brings us to the question that I think so many women are silently thinking is, why does fat storage tend to increase later in pregnancy, right? And that is something that can just feel so incredibly frustrating. And it's because our body's preparing to survive, right? In the third trimester, especially, our body becomes more efficient at storing energy, particularly in the form of fat, because it's preparing for labor and potentially breastfeeding, hopefully breastfeeding. And labor, if you've been through it, it's metabolically demanding. I know mine definitely was. I'm glad that's over. Breastfeeding is metabolically expensive, right? Sleep deprivation is really metabolically stressful. And fat storage in late pregnancy is not a cosmetic issue. From our body's perspective, it's a biological insurance policy, right? Because your body doesn't know if food is going to be abundant postpartum. It doesn't know how your sleep's going to look. It doesn't know what stress is coming. So it prepares, and we understand that it changes. If we understand that it changes the narrative, right? That weight gain in pregnancy is not necessarily a lack of discipline, although it can be. And in my first pregnancy, many trips to yogurt lab and too many root beer floats and Rice Krispie bars, I would say was the path to weight gain. But, there is just going to be some weight gain in pregnancy, and it's not a lack of discipline, right? And I think, if we're willing to be honest with ourselves, we can sort that out, whether it's a lack of discipline or just, part of pregnancy. And fat storage in the third trimester, as much as it can feel really frustrating, isn't a metabolic failure. It's a protective adaptation that our body was designed to do. And that doesn't mean, just gestational diabetes risk should be ignored, right? That doesn't mean our metabolic health doesn't matter. It absolutely does, but it does mean that we need to respect, what's going on inside of our body during pregnancy, right? Because pregnancy isn't a cutting season. It's not a fat loss season. I just saw something online. I don't know how true this is, but that like women are staying on a GLP-1 while pregnant. That seems wild to me, right? But pregnancy isn't a fat loss season. It's a building season. You're literally building a human, right? And when you stop, fighting biology in our body and start working with it, you can find a lot of peace in that process. But sometimes, and I would say in my case, sometimes it's easier said than done. So, transitioning back to, you know, some things that I think I did well during pregnancy. There's a lot of things I felt like I didn't do that great. But I think I did a pretty good job. For the most part, there were seasons, but stress management, I think I did a pretty good job prioritizing protein and trying to keep a balanced blood sugar. A lot of walking until it became really painful. And then I would like to say I did a good job keeping perspective through pregnancy, but I felt like I kind of struggled. And so, yeah, pregnancy is just like, it's a whole thing, and everyone's story is their own, and no stories are exactly alike. But I think it's really important that we understand what is happening through the process of pregnancy and embrace it for what it is. Try to do our best to, stay metabolically healthy for ourselves and our baby, because, if you listen to my last episode on pregnancy that I recorded, and I actually, fun story, I recorded that like the week before I got really sick at the beginning of my pregnancy. Um, yeah, it's really important, right? For us metabolically, for our baby metabolically, but at the end of the day, we can only do the best with the circumstances we're given. And then we have to let the rest of it go because there's only so much we can control. And that's like requires a lot of mental surrender, which is so hard. I'm a little bit of a control freak. I like to control things. But pregnancy and, delivery and the postpartum period is literally a lesson in mental surrender and letting go of control and being willing to ask for help and receive help. Fun little story before we move on to like talking about postpartum. I have historically been someone who is really bad at asking for help and receiving help. I just want to do it all myself. I don't want to rely on other people. It's a flaw. I'm working on it. But I have made a lot of progress in the last couple of years. But a friend of mine, I told her that I was newly pregnant and just like super sick. And she was so sweet. She's a part of our homeschool group as well as our church. And she put together a meal train for us. And no joke, we had people bringing us meals for like a month straight when I was in bed and like unable to work. And I couldn't cook at this point too because the smell in my house, like this is like a sidebar story. One time my husband was trying to make a meal because this is when my blood pressure was super low and I had to be laying down. But my husband, bless his heart, is not the best cook. Like he just doesn't do it that much because I do 99% of our cooking. He burnt whatever it was he was cooking. I don't remember what it is, but our bedroom is at the back of the house. The kitchen is at the front. The smell got into our room and it just like took me over the edge. I I walked out our front door and I laid on our porch on the like hard wood, just like laid there in the fresh air because I could not be in our house because the smell was so awful. That's how bad things were. But so I was just like flat on my back, unwell, and my friend put together this meal train and shared it with our church and our homeschool community, and we had people bringing us meals for like a month straight. And it was the biggest blessing. And I felt so loved and taken care of and seen. It was also super humbling to receive the help. But I say this because I think, we're meant to live in community and we're not meant to carry all of life's burdens alone. And so having community, investing in your community, and then also being willing to ask for help or open yourself up to be helped um, is it's so life-changing. And it's going to make you feel seen and loved and taken care of. And it's so much better to live life not on an island. So that's, a sidebar of a sidebar of a sidebar. Transitioning back, let's talk about the first 6 weeks postpartum. So let's talk first about like what's happening in your body after you give birth. Okay, let's talk postpartum because if pregnancy is metabolically demanding, postpartum is metabolically disruptive. Okay, and I don't say that to scare anyone. I just say it because if you understand what's happening, you're far less likely to panic or push your body too far or punish your body for responding exactly the way it's supposed to, right? So the first thing that happens after delivery is a massive hormonal drop. So estrogen and progesterone, which were elevated and steadily climbing throughout pregnancy, they fall dramatically within hours after the placenta is delivered. And this isn't something that happens gradually or gently, it happens abruptly. So for 9 months, your body has been bathed in high levels of these hormones. They support the uterine lining, they regulate blood flow, influence your mood, impact insulin sensitivity, support breast tissue growth. They do a lot, right? And then suddenly, boom, they're gone. And that crash alone can impact our mood, our energy, our temperature regulation, and even how your body handles glucose. And this is one of the reasons postpartum can feel emotionally fragile and physically disorienting. It's not just, the baby. It's really like what's going on with our chemistry in our body. And then we layer in, sleep deprivation, the sleep deprivation is not a small inconvenience, it's metabolic chaos. And if you've been around here for a while, I'm always talking about sleep. I'm harping on sleep because it's so foundational to our health, whether you're postpartum or just, the average person living their life. Even one night of poor sleep can reduce your insulin sensitivity the next day. Now imagine fragmented sleep for weeks at a time, right? Maybe months, maybe years. And then when you're waking up frequently, your body produces more cortisol. Or even if your baby just like gasps in the middle of the night or like squawks, I don't know about you, but when Josiah does that, it's like I bolt upright in bed and my heart's racing and I'm sure I'm getting a little cortisol spike. But when your body produces more cortisol, your blood sugar becomes harder to regulate, your appetite hormones shift, cravings increase, and at the end of the day, your recovery slows. And here's what's important, and this is again, this is important. It doesn't mean that your body's broken in any way. It means your body is prioritizing survival, which is what our body is designed to do. Our nervous system shifts into a more vigilant state. We're biologically wired to wake up when our baby cries or makes noise. And this hyper responsiveness is like a protective measure, but it's also very metabolically demanding. And let's talk about cortisol a little bit more specifically. Cortisol doesn't just rise from a lack of sleep. It fluctuates significantly postpartum. Your body is, recovering from a physically intense event, whether that's a vaginal delivery or a surgical one. Cortisol plays a role in inflammation, control, energy mobilization, and our tissue repair. But if stress is high and sleep is low, nourishment is, and I should say, and if nourishment is inconsistent, cortisol can stay elevated. And when cortisol stays elevated, blood sugar tends to run higher, fat storage becomes easier, and recovery feels slower. Again, that's just how our body is meant to work. It's not a personal failure. So now, if you're breastfeeding, we also have two powerful hormones at play, oxytocin and prolactin. Oxytocin is often called the bonding hormone, and it promotes attachment, it's calming, it promotes connection with your baby. It also helps with milk letdown. And then prolactin is responsible for milk production. And both are beautiful and protective hormones, but prolactin in particular can suppress ovulation and alter reproductive hormone patterns for a time. And that shifts our entire hormonal rhythm, right? Breastfeeding is metabolically expensive. Your body is diverting nutrients, glucose, and calories from milk production, but that the metabolic expensiveness, that's great grammar for you, does not necessarily, breastfeeding does not necessarily result in weight loss. If you're like me, who generally has a hard time releasing weight or body fat when I'm breastfeeding. But this does mean your energy demands are higher, even if your activity level feels lower, right? And then we have fluid shifts. During pregnancy, our blood volume increases dramatically, like we talked about earlier. And then after delivery, that fluid has to go somewhere, right? So that's where we get the sweatiness of postpartum, night sweats. Maybe you urinate more. You may notice rapid scale changes that aren't necessarily fat loss. Your body is really recalibrating its fluid balance, and at the same time, inflammation is present as it should be. Inflammation gets a bad rap, but in the immediate postpartum period, controlled inflammation is just part of the healing process, right? Your uterus is contracting back down, tissues are repairing, the placental site is healing. And, if you had tearing or you ended up with surgery, that tissue is rebuilding, right? And that all requires energy, it requires protein, and it requires nutrients, right? That healing process. And, it's not a moment to undereat, to aggressively fast, and a time to create additional stress, right? Postpartum is a repair season. And, when you zoom out and see the full picture, hormonal crash, sleep deprivation, cortisol shifts, breastfeeding demands, fluid recalibration, tissue repair, it becomes very clear, why our body may hold on to weight a little bit longer, right? It's not necessarily because it's stubborn, it's because it's stabilizing. And when you understand that, you can stop fighting with your body and start supporting it, right? And my hope is that that shift alone will change everything for you as you look at, your body postpartum. So now, um, I want to shift a little bit and talk about before talking about how my last 6 weeks have went and what my plan is moving forward. I want to talk a little bit about the mental and emotional layer of this process of postpartum, because this is the part that doesn't show up on lab work, right? Because as much as our hormones shift, our identity shifts too. And it doesn't matter if this is your first time having a baby or your fourth time, like me. And that can be extremely destabilizing. And, there's something profound that happens when you become a mother or when you expand your family again. You are the same person and you are not the same person, right? Your priorities have to shift, your time shifts, your body shifts, and your capacity shifts. I feel all of those so deeply. And even if you feel strong, even if you feel so grateful, there's still like an identity recalibration happening. For months, pregnancy required you to slow down physically. Postpartum often requires you to slow down in every way, right? Because you've got this little baby demanding your time and attention 24/7. And if you are someone who is driven, maybe someone who likes to be really productive, if you're goal oriented like me, that slower pace can feel extremely uncomfortable. And you may be used to measuring progress. You may be used to training hard or setting targets and hitting them. And postpartum doesn't necessarily cooperate with that mindset all the time, right? It asks you to respond instead of control. It asks you to rest when you would rather push. And it asks you to move slower than maybe your ambition would like you to. And that can feel extremely vulnerable. And this is, a kind of exposure. There's kind of like this exposure in postpartum, where your body is softer, your sleep is fractured, your emotions are closer to the surface, and you may feel stronger in some ways, but more fragile in others. And, there's these moments of deep gratitude and also simultaneously moments of quiet overwhelm, um, sometimes in the same moment, sometimes in the same hour, or just like back and forth throughout the whole day, right? And layered on top of all of that is cultural pressure, right? The subtle and sometimes not so subtle message that says, how fast are you going to get your body back, right? This is something I feel, especially working in the weight loss space. Or, let's see some before and after pictures, or let's jump into a 6-week challenge. And, there's all this like no excuses messaging, or narratives about snapping back. And, if you're not careful, if I'm not careful, that voice can get really loud in our head. And the temptation to try to, quote, bounce back is strong, right? Especially if health and fitness are already important to you. And, you might catch yourself thinking, I catch myself thinking, I know what to do. I've coached other people through this. I should be further along. I can push harder. But here's what, we have to remind ourselves is that bouncing back is not the goal, rebuilding is. Bounce back culture is built on urgency, and postpartum physiology is built on stabilization, right? Those are two very different timelines. When you're sleep deprived, when your hormones are recalibrating, when your tissues are healing, when your nervous system is adjusting to the around, or how do you say it, round the clock responsibility. The question is not how fast can I get lean again? The question is, how can I create safety in my body again? And, how can I create space for my body to heal and rebuild? And truly, there is humility in that, and there's patience required in that. And honestly, there is growth in that because it's hard, right? And usually when things are hard, it means that there's a growth opportunity there. And truly, I think postpartum exposes where we tie our worth So whether that be productivity, performance, or aesthetics, and it invites us to detach from, urgency and reattach to intention on this health journey. And for me, this season has been about resisting the pull of comparison. And the idea that because I understand metabolism, I should somehow be immune to biology and all the changes that my body has gone through, right? And instead choosing to honor the slower pace. And thankfully, I can say these last 6 weeks, I've really done that. And choosing to respect vulnerability instead of overriding it, which I am so prone to doing, and choosing to build instead of rush, right? There's a difference there. And understanding that this isn't weakness, it's really wisdom. It's wise, it's kind to do, for myself. So, with that, a little bit about my last 6 weeks. So, I gave birth. My, I know people love birth stories. I feel like mine isn't that crazy exciting, but I'll give you a Cliff Notes version. So I did go over my due date. People are always like, "Oh, you'll probably go early. It's your fourth." And I just tell them, "Nope, I only ever go late." And I went late again. Um, so I was over my due date, just trying to patiently wait. And one night, went to bed. I knew that I was probably going to go into labor in the next couple of days because I had lost some of my mucus plug, and I had also had my membranes swept. And you can kind of tell, especially when it's your fourth time. But I woke up one night, 1 in the morning, and I think this was Friday. It was a Friday I gave birth. I woke up at 1 in the morning to strong contractions that were really painful. And so I got up, kind of, got some water, went to the bathroom, and just was like, okay, let's see what happens with this. They persisted and were pretty regular. So at this point, a friend of ours, we didn't know exactly who was going to come over to our house to be with our three big kids, who are 9, 7, and 4.5. And so in our hospital was 30 minutes away. So I had a little bit of like anxiety about, okay, if I go into labor in the middle of the night, am I going to be able to get someone to wake up to come hang out with my kids? So called our friend. Thankfully, they were able to come right away. I ate some breakfast, well, in the middle of the night breakfast, and my husband and I head out to the hospital. And on the way there, my contractions totally peter out, right? So classic. We get there. I try to, walk around, do some things to get them going. It's not working. By this time, it's like 5 in the morning, 5:30. The nurses were so kind. They were like, just lay down, take a little nap. If labor's going to happen, it's going to happen. Just like get some rest, and then we'll reevaluate in a little while. So my husband and I lay down for a nap. I was able to kind of sleep a little bit for like 40 minutes. And then we met with the midwife and decided to break my water based on the positioning of the baby and whatnot and how much I was already dilated. We broke my water at around like 8 in the morning, and that really got things going really fast. Unfortunately, as I was in transition, I felt like my blood pressure dropped again, to where I was feeling really dizzy and I couldn't like be upright. I had to be laying down. I almost passed out at one point, and thankfully my husband had the great idea of doing an IV, like a fluid drip, because I was having trouble drinking water because it was making me feel like I was going to throw it up. So I got some IV fluids. Transition is obviously awful. I'm not one to get an epidural. I haven't got an epidural with any of my pregnancies, despite the fact that my husband's an anesthesiologist. Just because, I don't know, I'm just like, let's do as few interventions as possible. Not to say I haven't done interventions before. I would say this delivery, with the low blood pressure and then being in transition at that same time and not being able to move, I could tell that my contractions were trying to push the baby down, but it wasn't progressing. And I was like, okay, well, I know I need to change position if I'm ever going to have this baby and not be in so much discomfort. But I would like tried to change position or sit up, and I felt super dizzy and I like couldn't do it. So then I started to panic a little bit, and that's when we did the IV fluids. That was super helpful. I also did a TENS unit on my lower back, like electrical stimulation. That was very helpful. And then I also used nitrous, which is like laughing gas. And so, long story short, um, the fluids finally did their job. I was able to stand up, use the restroom, and I didn't feel like I was going to pass out anymore. So then from there, I was able to labor on the side of the bed, which I felt like was way more productive in regards to my contractions. Thank goodness. There's nothing worse than having these like horribly painful contractions and not feel like they're progressing to anything. That is just absolutely the worst. So labored on the side of the bed. Things moved really quickly from there. I would say within 45 minutes of that happening, I had him. And yeah, I was able to push him out with a lot of control, and I didn't have any tearing. Maybe that's TMI to share on the internet, but if the women who've had babies, if you know, you know. I feel really grateful for that. I was able to push him out really slowly, and yeah, there was like no complications other than the issue with my blood pressure being low and feeling like I was going to pass out. And thankfully, we were able to find a resolution to that, and I didn't pass out. So feel super grateful for that. And then, so moving into my birth, I had been eating really low carb, as I mentioned earlier. My goal was to after I leave the hospital, to go back to that eating. But this baby was waking up every 90 minutes and my milk was coming in. I was so sleep deprived. I was ravenously hungry, and I could just tell my hunger hormones were off the charts. So that didn't happen. I just allowed myself to, eat what was provided. We had some people bringing meals, we had people making, we like picked up meals, and so I just kind of was like, I'm just going to let be will be. Definitely ate more sugar than I would say is normal for myself in this last 6 weeks, but I was just trying to have a lot of grace for myself. So, and I would say this, so historically, my last pregnancy, my husband was in anesthesia residency, and he only had 4 days off of work, and I had a 4 and a 2-year-old on top of a newborn. And so historically, I have not been one to rest much after giving birth to a baby. And my last 2 pregnancies with baby number 2 and 3, I had got mastitis. And I know it was a result of overdoing it, burning the candle on both ends. And so my goal this postpartum period was to take a week and literally almost like stay in bed or in a chair, and then just really allow my body to heal, not go a whole lot of places, not do much, and just chill for the first 6 weeks, which I have literally never done. I think when my third baby was like 4 weeks old, I drove 4 hours, spent the whole day at this like camp outside with my family, and then drove 4 hours home. And this was with a 4, 2, and a newborn, or like a 4-week-old. I can be a little crazy. So what I did really well, I would say this 6 month or 6 weeks postpartum, is focusing on rest, right? I would say I did good trying to prioritize my protein intake, trying to prioritize rest and sleep and hydration, and even gentle movement, like doing walking. But I wouldn't say I did an awesome job with blood sugar stability, and making really like healthy food choices. I enjoyed some treats, we'll put it that way, but maybe you could say I earned it after giving birth. But moving forward, so now that I'm kind of coming out of my 6-week cocoon, these are some of the things that I'm really going to focus on moving forward. And this is what I'm going to share to wrap up this episode. Number one is sleep is king, right? It's going to be very imperfect, but sleep has to be such a priority because it's foundational to everything. So I am trying to get to bed and be in bed for 9 hours every night. So that, if I'm waking up multiple times to feed the baby, I'm still hopefully getting 8 hours of sleep, even if it's fragmented. Protein is a big priority, focusing on getting enough protein with each meal. Focusing on regulating my nervous system, 4 kids, people need me all day, every day. I homeschool. So I'm just getting asked for things 24/7. And then add on top of that, a newborn that's crying, that needs me. My nervous system very easily just like goes haywire and I feel way overdone. So regulating my nervous system is a big one. So making sure I'm not getting overstimulated. So putting myself in timeout if I need to, if I start to feel overwhelmed or I can tell my kids are really getting on my last nerve, I put myself in timeout. I tell them they can't come talk to me. They can't come near me. I just need a minute, right? Whether that's 5 minutes or longer. Obviously my newborn is with me, but setting some boundaries around that. I do have this piano or like this classical music playlist that I play that I started listening to in my pregnancy that I just like fell in love with. But I listen to that, I do some deep breaths, and it just helps. It's like I've trained myself to hear this music and it just calms me down. And I take some deep breaths and I just start to feel so much better. And then, I'm focusing. So this first week back, I'm doing a fat fast, like a modified fat fast. The foods that I'm eating are eggs, bacon, avocado, onions, and peppers combined together. And I'm eating that meal on repeat as much as I want for the next 3 to 5 days. Um, and the goal of that is to get my insulin in check. Like I know pregnancy is like very insulin stimulating. And then this last 6 weeks have also been very insulin stimulating for me. And I know if I want to have energy, if I want my appetite to be regulated, if I want my body to have the option to use stored fat for energy, I need to have my insulin be lower. So you can't fast when you're trying to breastfeed, but doing a fat fast, which is, unlimited calories, very high fat, moderately high protein, and then very low carb, essentially will have a similar effect as a fast, but just, still giving you calories so that you can make milk. Because I'm a milk making machine, guys. So I'm doing a fat fast for 3 to 5 days, depending how I feel. I'm on day 2. No, today is day 3 of that. And I feel really good. I actually feel like my energy is getting better. And I'm being very intentional about my hydration. And then after the fat fast is done, I'm just gonna, go back to eating more of a low carb, normal diet where prioritizing protein, minimal fruit, really no grains, probably no potatoes at this point. And then, just trying to feel well. It's not about weight loss. It's just about having energy. And I will say this, when it comes to trying to change your diet and lifestyle postpartum, it takes an elevated level of planning. So some planning things that I have done to help myself get back on track is I have made a meal plan for my family. So like Monday through Saturday, there's a meal that I'm gonna be making every week for the month of March. And we're just gonna have that. So like Monday night is either spaghetti or chicken Alfredo, and I have the ingredients for that. Tuesday night is Taco Tuesday. We'll do taco bowls. Wednesday night is a pork shoulder recipe with veggies. Thursday night, I'm going off my brain. It's Korean beef bowls with broccoli. Thursday, they will do pork nachos. I'll do something else. But with like the pork shoulder, and then Friday is chicken salad or something like that. I'm like blanking on the later days in the week because we haven't gotten there yet. But I have like a set menu that I'm just going to repeat for the next 4 weeks. And then next month I'll put together a new one because my family will eventually be sick of, eating that on repeat. But simplifying my food prep for my family, even if I'm sometimes eating something a little bit different than them because I want to be lower carb, because I know I just do better with that. That makes it much more simple. I'm also, I put together a workout plan for myself that incorporates exercises where I can hold my baby because imagining that I'm able to do a workout where my baby's like just sleeping or in the swing and doesn't need me for 20 minutes is just not realistic, right? It's like your baby knows the moment you try to do something for yourself and is like, hold me. And so I programmed that into my workout. And my goal is just to do 3 20 to 30-minute workouts a week at home for this season. And then also to walk about a mile a day, do 2 loops around my neighborhood and call it good. Right. And so I think setting realistic goals is also really important. You got to plan, you got to set realistic goals. And then, I think just surrender yourself to this season and what it's going to look like. It's not going to look perfect, but done is better than perfect, right? Like when it comes to our workout, when it comes to eating, we have to just hold things with an open hand. So with this, guys, I'm gonna wrap up this episode. We're getting kind of long here. I don't even know how long I've been going, but it's been a hot minute. After I'm done nursing, what I do is gonna look significantly different. But right now, my goal isn't necessarily weight loss. Like I hope I release some body fat. That would be great. But my goal is to just, build back strength, replete my repleted stores of nutrients in my body from pregnancy, and be my healthiest self. So with that, guys, as I wrap, because the baby is waking up, he's so cute. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. As always, like and subscribe, and leave a comment, share it with a friend. I would be so blessed if you would do that. And then just remember, everyone's journey is their own. There's no perfect way to go about pregnancy and postpartum, and just do your best, hold it loosely, and then, take it one day at a time, because at the end of the day, you're doing a really great job. So have a great one, guys, and we'll see you next week on the Lifestyle School Podcast.